each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV, and our order of business this evening includes the open session call to order, opening procedures, agenda review, and adoption. We are not doing introduction of new staff this evening because they are off tomorrow. We will do that a little bit later in the month, hopefully. We'll have time for public comment, and then we will go to the superintendent's update, COVID-19, opening of school, building project update, Mr. Kendall, assistant superintendent update, opening of schools and PD, warrant approvals. It says Mr. Kendall, but I think there's a blurb from me as well.
Yeah.
And then consent actions, acceptance of gifts and donations, committee reports of activities, member updates, action items, and then we will adjourn. So I will take the roll call and just double check, make sure everyone's okay with the order of business. I'll start with you, Tina.
Here and I.
Mark.
Here and yes.
Paul.
Here and yes.
And I do not see Aaron Williams yet, but it's all good for me too. So we will get started by seeing if there's anybody here from the public who would like to leave a comment. And I do not see anybody. So we will move right into the superintendent update. Please, Jim, COVID-19.
I'm going to just encompass all of this together.
Yeah.
COVID-19 as well as the opening of school. I want to just report that obviously we began school in earnest this week with students. I think Mike and I hit every building every day for a significant amount of time. And he'll report out some stuff in terms of conversations we've had with teachers and kids, et cetera. But I don't want to steal his thunder. That being said, I think from the perspective of administration, we were excited to have everyone back. Yes, there are bumps and bruises along the way. Transportation is always one of those. It will get fixed. It always does. We take about 2 weeks to process the times, and then we adjust the routes as necessary for families. But I think within a 10 to 15 minute margin at this point in time, considering all the construction that's happening around town, everyone coming back in is well within the margin of error, if you will, for what we typically have seen. I think having the fields, the track is being done at the high school. So we're struggling a little bit with our athletics and trying to find space and time for everyone. Hopefully that'll be done, of course, probably in the next 2 weeks in terms of letting it cure the track, so we can actually get out there again. COVID itself, we are participating in the test and stay program with the state. That's one of the options. Audrey and I have been going on numerous webinars with an organization called CIC. They're going to be the ones providing us the testing and actually a lot of supports with the testing, meaning personnel as well. So if we have to do a test and stay within a classroom, for instance, if someone is tested positive within the classroom and they're not vaccinated, we can test these individuals for 7 days, but it takes they're the Binax tests, but it's still a swab. And the CIC group will actually provide support personnel, so our nurses don't have to do this, to take them away from what they're doing. What we're finding, however, and Audrey and her nursing group, as well as the superintendent's group, is while that was a commitment by this organization when they made the contract at the state level, I don't know if they have the personnel to actually do this, to pull this off. That's what we're finding out. Many of us do not even have our tests yet. We do not anticipate actually having those tests probably until around the October 1. And that allows us to get all the training in as well for our nursing staff, should we have to give the testing. So knock on wood, we did have a positive case within the system this week. But in terms of close contacts, we weren't concerned about any of that within the school system, which was great. So Ed and Audrey and the nursing staff handled that. We're finding that families did travel and data from, but they got tested as they came back into the states or whatever. We're finding some of that data doesn't get reported immediately, and but families have been awesome with regard to communicating to our nursing staff. So they're actually quarantining on their own and doing the right thing. And then all of a sudden, I got a call from Ed this morning around 6 and said, "Hey, or yesterday, and we have 2 cases." Well, they were cases from July that finally got reported to the state of Massachusetts yesterday. But we had already dealt with it. Our nurses were on top of it. The kids were in school. But that being said, it was because it happened, almost 6 weeks ago. But we finally got the data. So it's kind of interesting. I do want to share a couple things with regard to enrollment and vaccinations, because I know there's questions out there that exist with regard to the commissioner's comment about 80%, and like to reconsider. Well, 80% is for a building and not for a district, because again, the way buildings are separated in all communities from an age range. So our high school students are about 14 to 19, whereas our middle school can be anywhere from 11 to 14. So will we ever achieve that 80% of the students at the middle school and the staff? Most likely not. But some districts are of 7-8 building where they might. And so, as we continue to have this dialogue, I think we need to be thoughtful of looking at the percentages within the buildings. That being said, the state reports certain numbers. And I made a comment at the last meeting that just because what we see at the state level doesn't really represent what's happening here in Ashland. And I want to share some data with you, because Audrey, and thanks Sharon Dickinson for pulling all this together for me. But I'm going to share my screen here. Can folks, I'm going to make it larger, but can folks see this anyway?
Yep.
Yeah, is that big enough so you can understand it? Okay, so if we were to go to the state website, you're going to see a couple numbers. The 12 to 15-year-old range says the town of Ashland has about 81% of our students, or 81% in that age range, are fully vaccinated. The 16 to 19 is about 95%. Now, the comment I made last meeting was those are not real numbers in terms of the Ashland public schools. And I want to clarify that, because we have to go through every single child that exists within our buildings and identify them. I say it's the nurses. I want to be clear. The only one that has access to this information is our nursing staff. I don't have access. They just compile the numbers for me. So for instance, in grade 9, we have an enrollment of 210 students. They're able to go track through the system that ties into our system, our nursing software and the state immunization software. We know for a fact that 168 students of this 210 are fully vaccinated. So 80% of the grade 9 students. Now, again, that age can vary, right? We can't assume everyone's 14 in this age group. And that's the next piece of data we're going to try to dig a little more deeply into, is disaggregating it by age. Because age and grade don't always coincide, right? And so we've just got to be careful with that. But as you look at the numbers, we have 811 students at the high school. And 632, or 78%, are fully vaccinated at this point in time. If we add in the first dose students, that gets us right to about 81% maybe, right around there. But we still have 153 of our students who are not vaccinated, or almost 20% of our students. The next logical question would be, what about our faculty and staff? We have asked, they're not required at this point to provide us this data. And the reason we can get this data is because these are all Ashland residents. And that data is our nursing staff has access to. Many of our staff do not live in the town, so we do not have access to their records. We have to request it and for them to turn it into the nurse. And then the nurse within our system can put it into our software. So at this point in time, we're still collecting that. I don't want to presume or provide a number without having the actual data. Questions on this component before I move into enrollment and things that are happening within the district?
Jim, just to drill down on, I think the point you started with, which is, and I'm guilty as I'd assumed that when I looked at numbers like 16 to 19-year-olds, even though I understood a lot of 18-year-olds and certainly presumably almost all 19-year-olds are not in our system, that the vaccination rate was fairly consistent between 16 and 19 years old, looking just at that as one data point. And so when I saw 5% plus, like, great, that's what our high school is. But I think what you're really getting at is that 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds that are going off to college, they may be mandated. There may be some kids in private schools, but basically there's a disproportionate number of people who aren't in our system at the high school who are vaccinated. That number is higher. So that the net result is this 95% plus. But when we look at our kids for the purposes of the DESI rule, we're not quite there yet.
That's right. And the way they reported, Mark, is 16 to 19. And remember, at the high school, these are 14 and 15-year-olds here, right? For the most part, these juniors, halfway through the junior year, they might turn 16, right? Yeah. So there's a large chunk. They're saying in the town, 16 to 19, I think the number was about 800 residents in that age group. Mm-hmm. So we're only representing less than 400 right here. So so that's an important distinction as well. Okay.
Yep.
So I think the way that state breaks it down and the way we're breaking it down is we're focusing on building, because that's the only way we can get to a certain percentage that I think the commissioner is looking at as well, is that 80%, not per grade age level, but per building. So.
Hey Jim, just a quick question on the testing for the test and stay.
Yep.
So you mentioned that that program is supposed to be administered by someone else, but you also alluded to training. So, I'm just confirming that regardless of their capacity to do the testing on test and stay, our nurses will have the access to the supplies required in that program and be able to administer it should the administrator of the program not have the capacity to do so.
Yeah, great. 100% correct, Paul. We will have the training and the access and the ability to do the testing ourselves. We actually did this last year, the Binex testing, but because it's a new vendor, we've got to go through their training because it's their software, how we capture it within the system. And all that training will be happening over the next week and a half. Obviously, we have a weird next 5 days away from the building. So, but yes, rest assured, we will have the opportunity internally as well to do that. What I want to mention is, and this I sent out to the community a consent form that needs to be returned, and we're actually looking at having it be electronic as well. There's no reason why it can't be. Again, dealing with a new vendor, we're struggling with them, and we're not the only district that's struggling with CIC in the state vendor. There's another point I wanted to make about the test and stay.
Well, maybe while you think about that, should they not be able to fulfill their obligation?
Yep.
And I assume, like Audrey's team always does, they're going to keep dutiful notes and records on the time they spent doing someone else's job.
Yes.
You know, is there a reporting mechanism where we can let the state know that this is the amount of time we've spent doing this vendor's job, and then B, is there anything that we can get recouped for that time?
Well, B, I'm not sure. A, yes. We've been told there's a reporting mechanism for all of this in the time we've spent, but the reimbursement for our staff time, I'm not There's nothing that's been discussed there.
Yeah, I always doubt that, but.
Me too, but
Throw it in there as like.
yeah, no, I think it's a fair question because one of the reasons why originally we had asked and chosen CIC to actually help us is that we need to take some of that burden off from our staff. But our staff is also going through the training because it could be a very small segment, right? And we don't need the CIC folks to come out for a small population. So,
Yeah, if it's one student every day.
yeah, exactly. So what I remembered was yesterday's webinar, because you have to test for 7 days, if you're considered, if you have to be tested within the test and stay program, this includes weekends, right? And includes sports, and who's going to be responsible for testing. So CIC is like Monday through Friday, just like everyone else. And our nursing staff is Monday through Friday. So basically what they're saying now is, oh, wait a minute, you can actually video in to your nursing staff and watch a kid swab their nose and then do the test, as long as you train a coach or someone. Like, it's so like out of this world type behavior.
So Jim, the test and stay, while it applies only to school,
yeah,
they're expected to do it on non-school days?
Yes, we are.
I mean,
only if there's school activities, right?
Only if there's school activities.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
It includes them when there's school activities.
Correct. That's right.
I was trying to get my.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah, no, I wasn't clear.
Why would we care if somebody
school activity? Well,
Sunday,
theoretically, they should be quarantining at home, right?
Right.
Right.
But it's not the test and stays responsibility.
That is correct. That's right. Correct. So.
And how often are there school activities on weekends? Like just in
At the high school every weekend.
yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah. Athletics. Mark's learning that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't get me going. Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? Because I thought earlier Jimmy said that the tests weren't even going to be available until the end of the month.
Yeah.
Is that right? So what are we doing for the
So
next
we're following
4 weeks?
last year's protocols.
Okay.
So if we considered someone a close contact, they're quarantining. We just have to follow those protocols until then. So.
Is there any opportunity to acquire Binax tests through some other means to implement?
So we have them, Mark.
Okay.
It's just, I don't know. We had them from last year. And I got an email from the vendor we used last year saying you need to return all the supplies. It's a conversation that we will have with Ed next week. If we need to go down this road, can we utilize the test from last year?
Well, and maybe to piggyback on Mark's, I think where Mark was going is, do we have, in order to utilize the test and stay protocol to be able to be enabled, do we need to wait for the vendor, or should we have the capability of testing? Can we do the protocol ourselves, or are we only allowed to do it within the confines of when it's available through the vendor?
No, we can do it.
Okay.
It's just what my concern is. We don't have the vendors testing materials. We do have materials left over from last year. And as I stated, the vendor that we procured from last year sent an email saying, we need our stuff back. And my question to Audrey and Ed will be next week, do we just keep the stuff behind? We know how to use it, and do we use it? Now, remember, if you're in a classroom, and this is really only going to pertain to classrooms that typically don't have vaccinated kids in them, right? So if you're fully vaccinated, you're exempt from the testing protocols. So if it's at the high school, if it's at the high school, for instance, again, we're not quite at 80%, but for the most part, you're going to have a very small group of individuals that have to be tested. And if they're asymptomatic, that's the key. So if they're symptomatic, we want them out and to get a PCR test. So, but it's still a moving target. We don't know all of the ramifications yet. How this is going to unfold. I just want to keep you in the loop that while it's great to have something free, you get what you pay for sometimes too. And that's what we're getting right now is a lot of confusion at the state level and a lot of confusion at the vendor level. So just stay tuned on that. I'll keep you updated as those things unfold.
Now, can I ask questions about a couple of the things you touched on?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Okay. Are you all done on the COVID stuff for now?
Yeah, I'm going to move to the enrollment after, so you go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just two quick questions. One, you've talked about the track and its
Yeah.
progress. I'm certainly hearing some of the concerns about things like, why now, right? And so I don't remember the history on or the timing on, but was this something that we had control over the timing and we were slow in moving it, or was it okay?
Yeah, Chris, you can answer that fully, but the answer is unequivocally no. We didn't have. I mean, we hired a vendor back in June.
Okay.
That's when we had the contract, right, Chris? Or right around the 1st of July, and then weather dependent. If you remember, July was rainy. If you remember, then hot and humid, and they were started doing work. And it's just the company itself has other projects as well, and so we're stuck based on their schedule. So it's nothing we could demand in terms of every time they did come out, and you can see all the stuff is at the school.
Yeah.
They had poor weather, and they need that. I think that was honestly one of the reasons why the track is not as good a shape as it should have been after year one. To be honest, and if we could look back, we pushed the vendor to finish the track so we could open on Thanksgiving Day, if you remember, a number of years ago. And that the heating and the curing of the track itself suffered, I think, because we had some really cold nights, and that impacted how the track was, how it didn't solidify the way it needed to. And I think we just need to stay off it so they can let it cure properly. Chris, is that?
Yes, and related question: are we doing anything on the turf up there, or is it just the track that we're working on?
Just the track.
Okay. The only other question I had was you talked about a lot of construction going on in town and affecting transportation. I was just I think we had made an inquiry of you as to whether or not the town was trying to coordinate construction during this first week or two of school, when we've had circumstances in the past with construction being a colossal mess around busing, taking an hour to get across town because of it. And I'm just curious if we'd had better success in coordinating with the people doing those projects.
I don't want to say we've had great success. I mean, there's been communication, but I think minimal. I mean, we're talking 10 to 15 minutes. I think if you're in a car, Mike would tell you it took him 45 minutes to get from Mendez to the middle school. But that wasn't necessarily just because of construction, is because of the number of vehicles that are now on the road as well. So,
are we still seeing sort of lower than normal participation in busing?
No, that's high. The numbers are high. Yeah. Yep.
All right, thank you.
In the last screen I want to share, and it's going to be hard to see here. So I just want to give an update on where we are with enrollment. I think it's important that you understand the year that we're off to. And again, I track this daily. As you can see, it's been updated as of today. And Audrey's number was off by 1. We lost a kid before as she was running the numbers. So we're 810, not 811. So maybe our COVID percentage number is up another 0.002. Who knows? But when we compare things to NASDAQ, it's the company that does our projections each year. We try to look at what are the trends. Obviously, COVID hurt us in terms of the number of kids who decided to homeschool last year or unenroll, like kindergarten, for instance, they're not required to enroll. So what you'll notice is that we're up 60 kids, 59 kids as of this afternoon from last year. And it varies across grade level. I think it's important to know that Warren's up 35 kids. Well, of that, there's a 30 delta difference between the kids who were in end of 2021 was 204. Where am I? I got to go sideways. 204. Where's my kindergarten? They were at
To the left.
minus, so it was 174 at the end of last year. Or 204. Wait a minute, I'm going backwards. Sorry, I apologize. I'm trying to get my bearings because I was trying to give
Now, Jim, if you go 2 to the left,
I'm trying to give you two deltas. Yeah, 234. The first grade, last year they were in kindergarten at 204. So the first grade ended up 30 more kids. So the kindergarten, not all those families enrolled last year. Does that make sense? This 227, the delta is really, that's our true, that's the seniors last year. So I was trying to compare an apples to apples, like what our true number of, so we're down 8 kids, if you will, in the district based on the seniors who left and the fresh kindergarten who came in. Does that make sense? It just wasn't a, I didn't want to compare kindergarten to kindergarten because you're not, it's really kindergarten to first grade. So 219, 234 to 204.
So for kindergarten, you wrap the delta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you'll notice though, the Warren school is up 35 kids. So in first grade, 30, and in second grade, 13 kids. But the middle school, thank goodness, you all have the foresight to say, hey, let's work out this team aspect because the middle school is up another 24 kids, which is really helpful when you're dealing with, 7th grade of 238 and an 8th grade of 229. So those half teams are going to be really helpful. And we're already seeing that in terms of class size. The interesting component to this is, I think, looking at our ELL numbers. And you'll notice we're running about almost a 6.5%, because we don't have the full number of ELLs at the K yet, because they're still testing them, and they come in next week. But 178 students identified as English language learners, with 96 of those students being Portuguese speaking. I think that's important to know that our numbers are growing pretty quickly still, with regard to the English language learners. School choice is staying pretty level. We picked up about 6 kids this year, based on the seats we opened. Homeschooling went up 6 kids. So we're at 30 now. Last year it ended at 24. We're seeing families still with COVID saying we're just going to push it off a year, another year.
Jim, what would that number look like pre-COVID?
It would have been right in the low to mid-teens mark. So, but again, 59 is important because that's 59 more kids that actually go into our Chapter 70 funding. So if you're thinking long-term, that there's some potential revenue stream there that might assist us in the future. But again, it's just more interesting data. Warren and in the middle school, Paul, as we look at Mendez over the next 3 or 4 years, it's right around that 628 to 637 range. So well within that 635 that we're looking at for building a building. We certainly have only a couple really small groups, the junior class of 176 and that second grade class of 182. It'll be curious to see what happens there. The freshman class, 8th grade to freshman, obviously we know what happens there, right? We have students who go to Keefe Tech. So a decrease in 11 students from the 8th grade into the 9th grade.
Hey, Jim, so the current 6th grade class,
yep,
that used to be down in the 180s, right? When they were like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember that's Caden's grade. So I remember
Yep.
how it was down like full class.
Yep.
But now it's caught back up. Do we have any idea what, it just happened to be how move-ins occurred or something?
Yeah, it is. And Paul, if we were to break down and extrapolate the ELL students and the move-ins, you're going to find that 6th through 8 is where we're seeing a high majority of this 13, 13, and 10. We didn't have those numbers, and a lot of the move-ins in the increase in the population is because of that.
Jim, how much of an increase in the ELL population is there from previous years? Like this is, a decent percentage of our population, but how much bigger? Just because I can't do the math quickly.
Yeah, no. It's a fair question. So if we go back and look actually at the profiles in DESE, we've been running just under 6%. So it's probably 0.5% more, Tina.
Okay.
And again, we're not 100% sure. We're still testing kids at the kindergarten and the pre-K level as well. So, I just wanted to share that, hey, if you go look at the high school, for instance, all the 8 ELL kids at the high school are actually the 13 and 11th and 12th are all Portuguese speaking. That's the majority of our kids, 96 of the 178, 60% around there are Brazilian families. And the rest yep.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
But for the purpose of like when we talk about number of students who are ELL students,
yeah,
does that mean that they're receiving support? And if a student starts with us and is receiving LL support in kindergarten,
yep,
and they progress so that by the time they get to high school, they're fluent, as an example. Yeah. Is that why we see sort of more at the kindergarten level and fewer at the high school level, or is that more the matter of time and what that we're seeing different population moving into town in the last 70 years?
No, I think it's probably a combination, Mark, but we see more at the early elementary levels, and they're getting the supports, and by the time they get to the middle and high school, there should be less students who are in need. I would say the kids in the high school who are falling in this L category are many new students who are moving into the country and have not been part of our system. I know Kelly talked to me the other day. We have a student who just moved in, and Mike, you can tell me, we had a couple of, I think Warren and Mendez, that zero English at all, even at the high school level. So, but rarely, if they've been in our system, that's where these numbers get lower and lower. So
that's what I thought. I just
yep.
But even that total number has more than doubled since, at least since I've been around and talking about this. I remember we used to talk about if we got to 100, we'd be considered a high incident district and maybe qualify for some more services. But that we weren't even at 100 yet. Of course, this was a few years back, but it did sort of compound pretty quickly, didn't it, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but that's, it's interesting. I still think we're close to next year. They're predicting, 2796 is what NASDAQ is predicting for us. It'll be interesting. We're down 18 from their delta, or from what they anticipated, but I think would pick up about 14 or so kids from the homeschool, so they may be pretty accurate with their predictions. It'd be interesting.
Jim, I have a quick question, and you may or may not have this data, but there's been a lot of talk in town around the development and all of the building that's been happening with apartments and whatnot. Is there any way to tell how much of this kind of new student population is due to that development, or is it turnover in town from people moving out? You may not know. You may not have that. You know what?
It's a great question. And guess who usually has this information? If you look at the bottom of my sheet here,
look at that.
I typically do have it, but it's another report that Karen was running, or that has to run for me, because we do break it out, and we have broken it out in the past. I usually have that for you. I didn't get to it today.
No worries.
But that's where you'll see that. And I can tell you that, as Paul gives his update, I'll give an update at the end. I can tell you what we've roughly run, because I have that data from last year. I just have to go grab it. Yeah.
Okay.
But we do track it. Yes. Yeah. But as you can see again, Lori, go to your point, over 9 years, we're up almost 13% population wise.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep thinking we're going to tap out, but I don't know. we'll see. So that's really just the update. Schools opened well. We got 59 more kids. We're on top of the COVID. Audrey just texted me. It looks like there is a portal that we can hopefully ship out to families so they can do it electronically. But a colleague says it's very bogged down and slow, so don't do anything with it now. So hot off the press from Audrey LaCroix.
So Jim, you mentioned that, bus enrollment is strong, I'll say, right?
Yeah.
So does that indicate that we've seen a decrease from what we would have feared from last year as far as parent drop-offs? I mean, we were a crazy amount of parent drop-offs last year, partly due to the capacity restraints we had, but also just people finding that simpler to do. So how are we as far as that this year?
So anecdotally is all I can give you for now. Dave DiGirolamo would say it's so much better at the middle school. He's seen less traffic at the middle school. And Aaron, I don't know if you're listening, but typically I think the middle school has always been our largest draw in terms of participation on the buses, so that would make good sense there. Mendez is early in terms of the pickups, so we tend to get a lot of cars there. Mike, I don't know if Pete said anything about Warren, but the high school has been a nightmare from Kelly's perspective. And I don't necessarily think it's because of, it's more in the afternoon because kids are playing sports. There's lots of parent pickups versus the long bus ride home, I guess. But I'll have that, I can get that information for the next meeting. I think.
Okay. Yeah, no,
it's good.
It's more of my fear of, I know several parents who either they have a bad experience or they start pickup, drop off, and then they just never go back to the bus, right? And so with COVID and a lot of people taking that route, I'm just curious as to the impacts of, particularly at Warren and Mendez, where the impacts are substantial, to the roads and the community. Just whether we're seeing that return back to post-COVID normal levels or what that is.
Yep. I will make sure I get that for you for the next meeting.
Any other questions for Jim? Before we
Very
move on
short
to
report, Jim.
Yeah, right. The last thing I'll say then is, it's not, I'll just do as part of the superintendent update. Our next meeting, I know, Larry, we were going to bring this up at some point, but our next meeting is scheduled for the 16th, which is actually Yom Kippur. I don't know how we missed this one and that one, but we did in September. So, the next opportunity to meet is, I think, based on schedules, was the 30th. But then it backs up to the first meeting in October a week later as well. So I just want to put that on people's radar, and I'll probably send out a note to folks. And after I check in with Karen to see what looks like we need to do with regard to and agenda items. So I just don't want you to be shocked if you get an email from me saying, I think we should move it obviously off from Yom Kippur, but the 23rd or the 30th or October.
Yeah, are we comfortable? I mean, at least committing to right now taking it off the calendar. I mean, it feels like we shouldn't be meeting that day. I mean, just mostly because our schools are closed. That's part of recognizing the day. Even, as a bad Jew that I am, it's really not about that to me. But it feels like if we're closing school, we ought to honor that throughout. But it just for the purpose of taking it off my calendar personally, is that where we're at this point, Larry?
Yeah, I wouldn't attend a meeting on that day, and or expect anybody else to if they have the day off and for whatever reason. So I would be in favor of taking it off the agenda, off the schedule for that day. And I would suggest maybe that Jim give Mark and I the upcoming topics, and we could take a look at whether it looks like they should be spread over 2 meetings or 1 meeting in the beginning of October, unless people are pretty sure. I think the only thing that we were going to do tonight that didn't work because of tomorrow being a holiday, and then we would have pushed it to the next meeting, which we're now canceling, is the new staff introductions. So if folks want to do that sooner rather than later, then we should get something on the calendar for September. But again, as Jim said, the next meeting is just a week later. So if folks are feeling like it's okay to wait for that October meeting, unless we're going to be swamped with, too many agenda items to have a productive meeting, I would suggest just having the one meeting unless there are things that really we should address sooner rather than later. How do you all feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would punt if we don't need a meeting for some reason, but I also don't think we, pending people's schedules, we don't need to stick to the Thursday either. We shouldn't have a building committee meeting on that Tuesday, the 14th. So if that was something that would work for people, that's typically why we didn't want to touch Tuesdays, right? Was because of the building committee meetings. So we were meeting on the 8th, so we wouldn't be meeting on the 14th, at least at this point, unless something unforeseen happens and I need to scramble to schedule one. So that's another option if we don't want to, because it doesn't make a lot of sense unless we have a real need to do the 30th and then the following week, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My thought is to, if we can, to have another meeting in September, mainly because the beginning of October, per the commissioner's mask, whatever you want to call it, his requirements, that's when he's going to be reevaluating. And that may be something that we need to look closely at the beginning of October. That could take up some time. And, from kind of a holdover from the retreat is we were going to be discussing kind of our goals and objectives. So that needs to fit in at some point. I think we should do that sooner rather than later. So that's, why I would be in favor of having rescheduling that September meeting if we can.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well, if we have a date that ends up working for everybody.
Yeah.
So why don't I suggest then that I just send out a little, a poll on potential dates and check the town website to see if there's anything else going on either.
All right, sounds like a plan.
But we'll cancel the one on the 16th, just so we're clear there, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. No meeting on the 16th.
Right.
For anyone who's listening. And then next up, Paul Kendall with an update on the Mendez School building project. It's a good time. We haven't heard from, well, we've heard from you with updates, but we haven't had you on the agenda for a while. And I know that there have been some things going on, some meetings around town with other boards and kind of a critical time for your group. So if you could fill us in, Paul, on what's been happening, what's going to happen, how we can support you, whatever it is you want to share with us.
Sure. I mean, not much has been going on really, but so the project's currently in the permitting phase. So we're before both the Planning and Conservation Commission. So just so you understand what those boards are doing. So for planning, we are going through the special permit process. And conservation, what their purview is notice of intent and stormwater permit. So that's where they go through and evaluate our impacts relative to any of the resource areas that have been identified, wetlands in particular. And then they also issued the stormwater permit, so all their stormwater management things. The main topics that have come up during those things for planning, we've had discussions around the buffering for the abutters, parking, that both the amount and kind of the layout, and how the screening relative to the and the plantings around the parking lot. So for example, one of the waivers we're requesting is our bylaws relative to parking say once you reach a certain amount of parking spots, you're supposed to put islands and separate them and have vegetated islands and stuff like that. But as you all know, we particularly Mendez is our earliest opening school, and the clearing of snow has to be thought of seriously. So that's one of the reasons why the islands we were requesting a waiver, so we don't have islands in the middle of the parking lot and things like that, as well as we also have geothermal wells underneath there. So particularly planting trees and root systems, and along with those things wouldn't fly. So there's parking. Our request for an electronic sign has been a topic of discussion, as well as the oak tree near the grave. I think we've reached a good point on that, and so we're meeting next week with planning, and hopefully are coming to the end of job with planning on that. For conservation, the main conversation topics, they want to reclassify one of the wetlands that is to the west of the current field, the ORAD that we had, which is it's a wetlands delineation process, had it as an isolated wetland. They want to change that classification, so we've been working with them on that. We focused
What does
on,
that mean, Paul?
so essentially, an isolated wetlands has no protections. But what's called a BVW is a resource area and has like a 25-foot no disturb and a 100-foot buffer zone, and so basically they want to reclassify that in their order of conditions as a BVW. And essentially we've worked with them on just moving a few things to stay out of the stay 25 feet away from it. It's not a so we've been working with them on that. So it's not really impactful to the project, but it is something that we've been talking with them. Had to move, so there's some parking spots that are back there, service level parking lots that are near the loading dock and things like that, shifted to the east away from there, and so things like that are being adjusted based on that reclassification.
Thanks.
So another thing we've talked about is we did some, you might have seen or heard that we were out there and we were exploring the underfield drain that went and discharged into an intermittent stream that goes under Concord Street. So we did some investigation there and got some more information. And then just general stormwater management, including, how we do stormwater management during construction. So, that's all obvious things within their purview. So we're, I think, at a pretty good spot there. We just issued a new set of drawings and things this week, and are meeting with conservation again next week, and are hopefully nearing for both the planning board and conservation, finishing up those processes and getting orders and conditions so we can continue to move forward. This is all part of preparing to do our 60% construction document submission to the MSBA. And so one of the things that we do during that time is we do another round of estimating for the project. So the construction market continues to be volatile right now, so which led the last round of estimates come in a little higher than expected. So what does that mean? We basically kick into gear and do similar value engineering. So for those who don't know, or for anybody listening, value engineering is something that occurs throughout the life cycle of a project. It's where you review different things. Maybe you make alterations to design that can positively impact the budget and things like that. So you do your base design, then you start to manipulate it and see what you need, what you can change that comes in, and you get a better value. So that typically happens, like I said, throughout the life cycle. But whenever we hit an estimate that comes in higher, that basically expedites that process and accelerates it. Because what we have to do for each submission to the MSBA is we have to submit a balanced project budget to them. And I'll go over what that means in a second. So essentially, there's several different buckets that the construction budget has. So you have the base construction budget, you have a contingency for the construction manager, but you also have an owner's contingency bucket. There's also other contingencies like FF&E. Those are all the fixtures and furnishings and things like that. So there's many different buckets in there. And typically the contingencies aren't touched at this point in the project. You typically don't want to take and, reallocate your owner's contingencies, because those are typically used during construction for unforeseen things or change orders, scope changes, whatever the case is. So what happens is the project team goes through, they construct and really start to go through the project and outline things that can be modified or changed or removed. And they construct a VE list, the value engineering list. And that list is going to have lots of things on it. It's going to have things that are easy things they're going to recommend. Hey, why don't we change this? There's going to have things where it'll be an option, A or B. There's going to be other things that that are also just no, the town wouldn't accept and the building committee wouldn't accept. So when we go through that process, each VE item can be accepted, means, hey, we're just going to take it. We're going to make that modification. We're going to save the whatever amount of money to the budget and move on. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that when this was originally designed, the classrooms had like a viewing window, and also the door had a window in it. And one of the last rounds of VE that we did was to remove both the viewing window and the window in the door and have a side light on, so a window next to the door jamb, right, for those, because that was an easy one, because when we actually saw it in the design, that those viewing windows and things, we wouldn't want them anyway. So it was a really easy acceptance of that VE item. So those are things that are just no-brainers that we would do over the course of the project anyway. Other things we could do during the VE are, we can accept things as add alternates, meaning that we will, when we put it in the bid package, the base bid will not have it included, but the bidder will include that in a secondary item. So if you take this item and you use an add alt, you'll have a base number, and then you'll have the figure that what they're bidding on to add that at that time. So it's different than a change order, which are typically a lot more expensive. And so that might be something that material impacts the budget or the project, or you can just delay the decision on that to later on. So we talked about the contingency things. This would be a case where you're like, okay, I need to balance the budget right now. We don't have the bids, but we expect the bids to come in lower, or, hey, I have this contingency money and we expect to be able to have the funding to do this later on. And we're going to choose to do that at that point where we get the bids and know that we have that funding. So that's another thing we can do. They can also be rejected altogether. And so certain things that we could say are rejected. Somebody might say, well, we can totally get rid of this space or change this so it's not as functional as it was, and we can reject those outright. So that's just kind of give you the idea of what we're doing when we come into these situations where the estimates, and these are again only estimates, but when we go through this, we have to show a balanced budget, a balanced project budget to the MSBA. So that's
Can I just ask a question on that?
Sure, yeah.
So I assume that the way you're talking about this, that the net impact to the community in terms of overall cost and what's been approved from the debt exclusion, that's not changing, right? What you're talking about is managing the project within those numbers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have that total project budget. The total project budget hasn't changed. It can change. Like, so, if the town can put more money into the project if they wanted to, right? So say for example, we get into this and through the design process, we say, okay, well, hold on a second. We have this opportunity to do something else. I don't even know what that would be. I'm not going to throw out something, but the town really wants to do that. Well, we can't do it within the budget we have unless we had tremendous savings somewhere. The town could always add funding to the budget. Right? We can make an appropriation to the project and do that. Now, the MSBA, because of how the funding works with them, will ask for just proof of where that money comes from, because we couldn't be double dipping with them or some other state agency, or there's just a process for how we would do those kind of things. But so yes, the short answer is yes, what we're doing is we're working within the budget that's already been set. So we're seeing extraordinary market conditions right now. Steel, just, steel's the one that's kicking us in the teeth, the biggest, and I can only, there's no one that has the answer, but that I think this is a byproduct of a lot of the things that sound good on paper that just don't translate well. Like this, we've always been having during COVID, material costs have been up, right? And we knew this, and the estimators have been taking an escalation for those things. But this is different. So, and I don't think there's a way to uncorrelate the infrastructure stimulus package that the federal government did with this uptick, right? So it sounds really great on paper. Let's put all this money into here, but if there isn't the capacity of that industry to supply those projects, I think that's one of the biggest things that have hurt us on this is a lot of projects then all of a sudden started to go out. There's been a demand for materials that aren't available. So hopefully that will lessen as because I think one of the other challenges is, you probably all have heard the stories from people you know that have businesses. It's tough to get anybody to work right now, right? We have lots of people that have lots of jobs available, but hopefully that's gonna correct itself as some of the relief packages are running out and people will start taking those jobs. Hopefully all that will ease the current market, but that's what we're seeing. We're seeing an exceptional market, and just to give you an idea, we've talked about this during the prior to the votes for both this and the public safety building, right? To give you an idea that how the differences of timing work. So the public safety reaped the benefits of COVID, right? So they got in at a point prior to this extraordinary uptick where they saw a $7 million bid savings. They took $1 million of that because they've taken a low bidder and put it back into their contingency, but that's a significant savings. What we've seen since there is these really volatile market conditions, and we're hoping that the bids come in better than what we're the estimates, but we have to make these adjustments to the budget and have these conversations and figure out how we manipulate this to get the project that we need and want, but stay within the budget we're allocated. That was very long-winded, but it's complicated. So we still have the contingencies, but you don't want to be dipping into them too soon. So I don't want people to think that, hey, this is already over the $84.3 million project. It's not, but it's also we need to be prudent in how we manage it as well. So, and with that gets us into schedule. So the goal, as I said, is to be done with the planning board and conservation processes and get our permitting done in September, get early packages out for bid in September, mobilize the end of October, and breaking ground in early November. Now, I will say the permitting process is taking a bit longer than planned, and that, along with the VE process that we have to go through based on the estimates, they are putting a pressure on the schedule. But right now we're still tracking to be able to be on schedule. So hopefully we don't get any more delays or monkey wrenches into that. So, and just so you know, when we talk about early packages, so this is all probably a bit more information people really need. So the early packages are the steel, site work, and concrete. And so those will go out to bid first. Then there's all the other bids that will go out later in the year, probably end of year, beginning of January. At that point, we'll have what's called the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price from the construction manager. So at that point, they will have locked in what they're guaranteeing to deliver the project as designed will be. But so just to understand the bids that we'll see. So it's unlike, because we're doing it this way, we took this construction manager at risk approach. It doesn't look the same as, say, the public safety building. When they went out to bid, they were full CD sets, and it was one sets of bids that came in for the whole project. This is separated out so that the early packages of steel, site, and concrete are going to be going out within the next few weeks, and they're going to start with what they need to do earlier than the other trades will.
And you're saying by January, Paul, is when we should have the understanding of what that's gonna cost? Those parts of it?
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
GMP from Shawmut would be around the January, February timeframe, yes.
Okay.
And so we're still on target to open a building in the fall for the fall of 23.
That is still the plan, yes.
And what are the dates of do you know the dates of these upcoming permitting meetings that you have?
Yes, because it's next week. There's really only 2 days they can be.
Okay.
Because I also have a conflict because we have a building committee meeting on Wednesday as well to go over the VE list. So because we have holidays on Monday and Tuesday, conservation is Wednesday and planning board is Thursday. And building committee is also Wednesday. So, but the team's dividing and conquering. So we have representation from the project team that'll be handling the conservation commission meeting.
It's a big week. We'll leave
It's
it
a
at
big week.
We have a lot of those.
Yeah, no, this is a big one.
I'll say last week wasn't slow either.
I know, but this is let's get some stuff done week.
Anything
Thanks,
you
Paul.
need from the committee? Paul?
No, you got
By way of support
you got
or
a few million extra dollars
information?
you can throw at the project.
Yeah, a
that,
couple mil.
Stiff drink.
Nope, I think the project team's been working real hard and yeah, so hopefully we're going to get to end the job on some of these things and yeah.
Thank you, Paul, as always, for your diligence in this. I know there are a lot of other people in other school districts that have played the role that you're in, but I can't imagine that they're putting the kind of time and effort into it that you have. And I don't mean to single you out over the rest of the committee. I know a lot of people are doing a lot of work, but it's I certainly feel like your leadership in this has been critical to the project moving the way it has, to the precision which you handle it like you do with most things, but also the way you guys have generated public support for the project and funding. And as I've said many times, you don't get 90% of people in this town to agree on anything, and have 88% support for debt exclusion is tremendous. Thank you for your continued work.
No, appreciate it.
Ditto.
Ditto here too. Thank you, Paul.
And to the entire committee. It's, everyone's been putting in a lot of time and a lot of effort. We appreciate you. So thank you.
Yeah, and also I know people do this all the time, but our professionals, this is rare air for them too. They're going through a time that none of them have experienced with what they're seeing in the market, and so they've had to put in the time and effort to get us through 2 rounds of, well, we're not through the second round of value engineering now, but but they've done a great job in working with us and also our planning and conservation and reacting to and accommodating the requests of those boards. So
Excellent. Many thanks to all of you. Any last questions before we move on to Mike? Mike, the moment you've been waiting for. You're up.
I'll just hit a few quick highlights from our opening days with professional development at the high school. We were able to provide all staff with some new technology, the New Line interactive panels. So they were able to come and train all of our staff to be able to utilize those efficiently and effectively. So we're excited to be able to introduce those for our students and staff. Also, the high school team spent some more work with each other, working on our equity and our diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we had started last year, facilitated by our CARES team. At the middle school, the work began there in terms of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And the facilitators, Chris Taylor and Des Floyd, worked alongside Principal DiGirolamo and his staff to begin that work. And it went really well. And they had some great discussions. So we're hoping that we can continue the momentum from the high school at the middle school. At the elementary level, we are still in the implementation phase for our Lucy Calkins work. So Claire Landergren, who has been working with us for the last 2.5 years, worked alongside all of our teaching staff. She did 2 hours of programming for Warren and 2 hours of programming for Mendez to continue making sure everybody is ready and prepared to fully implement Lucy Calkins. Also, we've had a slight change in our Envisions math programs I talked to you about at our summer retreat, where we're now utilizing an updated version. So Envisions also did a 2-hour training with our teaching staff to make sure everybody was up to date with all the changes that are entailed with that program. At the Pitaway, Mrs. Davidson and her staff have really been emphasizing the importance of play. And she organized some wonderful PD that was really centered on the teachers working with one another about what students can do to play effectively and with each other, and to also show them the varied ways that they can do that in terms of the different tools. Everything can be used as play. And it was really impressive to see how the teachers incorporated that for one another. She also had Sherry Wynn come in, who is an excellent speaker, and Sherry took some time to speak with the staff. So all in all, it was a good couple of days of PD. Staff is ready, they're focused. And as Jim and I walked around this week, it was especially nice to see them already jumping right in and creating relationships and making routines. But one thing that struck us was a conversation we had with a few different teachers who talked about the importance of taking time because of the major transition that our students are having right now. We need to remember that there are some students and staff members who have not been in the building since March of 2020. And we talked to a first grade teacher who said, I've got a whole new respect now for our kindergarten teachers, because I feel like I'm at the point where I'm teaching students how to be students, because they missed a lot of that. So I think we all need to just remember that we've got to slow it down a little bit, make sure we spend extra time on these transitions, because there are indeed students who have been out of school for a very long time. And even those kids who were in school last year, a lot of this is new. So we've got to get back to routines, back to basics. It's important that we're taking our time, and I know that our staff is doing that because we saw that happening as we walked around. So that's a nice quick one. 5 minutes, Mr. Adams, is how I kept it to. So there we go.
Good job. And certainly excellent points, right? That's true for every human being probably on the planet right now. And it's good that we're giving space to recognize that. So thank you.
Yeah.
And then next up are the warrants. I had one left to sign before I turned it over to Mr. Kendall, who's going to be doing it moving forward. So I will read the last warrant that I signed, Paul, and then you can turn it over to you moving forward. So between June 18th, 2021 and July 16th, 2021, I, Laurie Tosti, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $1,513,514.55. This includes general fund expenses of $879,200 $209.87, and revolving expenses of $545,354.41, grants expenses of $88,902.87, and meals tax expenses of $47.40. I also signed off on $6,114,709.96 of payroll.
All right. So between July 19th,
Top that.
my numbers are going to be smaller than yours, but so between July 19th, 2021, September 2nd, 2021, I, Paul Kendall, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $534,635.35. This includes general fund expenses of $414,976.45, revolving expenses of $28,523.09, and grant expenses of $91,135.81. I also signed off on $593,149.57 of payroll.
Not bad for a rookie.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Do we have any gifts and donations this
We
evening, Jim?
do. Yep. Ashland K-12 PTO in the amount of $350 to the David Mendez Art Program from Square One Art. Plan Aid, $189, general clothing donation. Ohio Pile Prints, $27.69. Plan Aid, $416.50. And Plan Aid again for $241.50 for a total of $1,224.69.
Do we have a motion to accept the gifts and donations?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, Mark?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
An aye for me. And moving on to member updates. Does anybody have anything else that they want to share since we last met?
Nothing I can think of.
I did attend the Conservation Commission meeting as well as the Planning Board meeting, and I hope to attend them this coming week as well, Paul. So thank you for that. They're long meetings.
Hopefully next week will be shorter than the last
Lots
week.
to do there.
The long meetings, yes.
Nothing else?
Tina, it's about 22% we run, just so you know, condos and serious.
Oh, okay. I was like 22% of what?
You
Typically
go
around,
fast?
typically around 22% of the population.
Okay. Those are 22% of the new students, or that's
No,
in
no,
general?
no, not the new, overall.
okay.
And
Okay.
we can break down the new though as well.
Gotcha.
But I want to give you an idea because I try to track those apartment complexes and how they've impacted. So,
Thank you.
Okay, everyone knows what the action items are coming up. We will take a look at some dates from Jim and take a look at the agenda items for the next few weeks or month and get back to you on what we might do for our next meeting. So if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Paul?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
An aye for me. Have a wonderful long weekend, everybody. I hope some of you get some downtime.
do we have a meeting tomorrow, Paul?
Oh, no.
We absolutely have a meeting tomorrow.
I know we
morning.
don't, I'm joking. I know.
Good
we
night,
do.
everybody.
See you at
Good night.
8:30.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
We'll see you.